Path of the Iron Asura. Chapter 1. Snowflakes lashed against his face. The child could walk no further. His legs had gone numb, his entire body frozen, sensation lost long ago. How long had it been since he'd been driven from the village outskirts? The sun had been at its zenith then, and now it seemed ready to set. The sky had already turned ashen gray, and the snow fell ever more fiercely. "Please, just one coin." He attempted one last plea with a trembling voice, but the passing traveler ignored the child entirely. No, it wasn't even indifference. The man glared and spat. "Get lost, you filthy thing!" A kick flew at him. The child tried to dodge, but his body wouldn't obey. He took the blow directly, tumbling into the snowbank. Cold, so cold, yet strangely he no longer felt the chill. No, he almost felt warm, as if his body were melting away.
The child knew. This was the end. Memories surfaced hazily. His mother's face, his father's voice, neither came to him anymore. Only the fact of abandonment remained vivid. At the village outskirts, among the hay piles, the moment someone's footsteps had faded away, leaving behind his wailing self. After that, the child had begged. 1 coin, 2 coins, scraping through each day, eating leftover rice, filling his belly with cold water, enduring the cold in tattered clothes. He'd endured and endured again, but this winter was exceptionally harsh, too harsh. The money from begging couldn't buy a warm place to sleep, and the food he'd begged couldn't provide the strength to withstand the cold. And so it had come to this, collapsed in the snow, slowly dying. Is this how I die? The child closed his eyes. He had no strength left to open them. Snowflakes covered his face. Something cold rolled down his cheek. He couldn't tell if it was tears or melted snow. No, he didn't want to distinguish. He just wanted to sleep like this, peacefully, without pain, to simply disappear. Then it happened. Oh no! A low, thick voice reached him. The child tried to open his eyes, but his eyelids wouldn't move. He could only feel someone's footsteps drawing near. Then warm hands enveloped his body.
"Still alive, I see." The voice was gentle, warmer than any voice the child had ever heard in his life, so warm it hurt. Why did such a warm voice exist? Why was he only hearing it now? That was what hurt. "Let's go." The child was lifted up into someone's embrace, warm, truly warm. It was the first time since birth he'd felt such warmth. Only then did the child shed tears, not cold ones, but hot tears streaming down his cheeks. He wanted to live. Suddenly, desperately, madly, he wanted to live. But his consciousness was already fading. The last thing he saw was the face of an old man with snow-white beard, benevolent eyes, and within those eyes the child saw something else. Sorrow, deep and ancient sorrow. As if the old man understood his sadness, comprehended his pain, that kind of sorrow. And the child lost consciousness. When he opened his eyes, it was night. He saw a ceiling, a wooden ceiling. Firelight flickered, candlelight, warmth. His body was warm. A blanket covered him, a soft, warm blanket. "You're awake," a voice spoke. The child turned his head. The old man sat there, the one who'd rescued him from the snow. Snow-white beard, benevolent eyes, but within those eyes sorrow still lingered. "Where is this?" The child's voice was hoarse. The old man poured tea and handed it to him. "My home. Drink." The child took the tea and drank. Warmth. It seemed to warm him to his very core. Only then did the child realize he was alive. He hadn't died. "Thank you for saving me."
Tears welled in the child's eyes. The old man shook his head. "It's nothing. I only did what was right." I... The child couldn't continue. He didn't know what to say. Thank you? Those words weren't enough. This old man had saved his life. "What's your name?" the old man asked. The child started to answer, then hesitated. A name. Did he have a name? He couldn't remember. After his parents had abandoned him, no one had called him by name. He'd only been called things like "Hey" or "You." "I don't remember." At the child's answer, the old man fell into thought for a moment. Then he spoke. "Then I shall give you a name. Jianggang." Jiang meaning upright, and gang meaning strong. May you live righteously and with strength. Jianggang. The child repeated the name. Jianggang. His name. The first name he'd ever possessed. The child, no, Jianggang, bowed his head. "Thank you, grandfather." And so Jianggang's new life began. The first few days were spent recovering. Hiejin cared for Jianggang with utmost devotion, cooking warm porridge, brewing medicinal herbs for him to drink, tucking him in each night. Watching Hiejin do all this made Jianggang happy. It was the first happiness he'd felt since birth.
He Zhen lived in a small cabin deep in the mountains. Trees stood thick all around, and it took about a shi-shen to reach the nearest village by mountain path. It was a remote place, but Jianggang liked it. It was quiet, peaceful, and above all, He Zhen was there. Once his body had recovered, Jianggang began helping He Zhen with work. "Grandfather, is there anything I can do?" Jianggang asked. He Zhen thought for a moment, then nodded. "Then fetch some firewood. Winter isn't over yet, and we need fuel." "Yes." Jianggang picked up an axe and went outside. It was cold, but bearable. He had warm clothes now, and his belly wasn't empty. Jianggang began chopping trees. At first he was clumsy. The tree wouldn't fall with one swing of the axe. It took several strikes just to make a dent. But Jianggang didn't give up. He kept swinging the axe. He Zhen watched from a distance. A persistent child, He Zhen thought. The boy had no particular talent, nor was he strong, but he didn't give up. He kept swinging the axe. That sight moved He Zhen's heart. This child, perhaps... He Zhen stopped that thought. It was still too early, not yet time to burden this child with his own load. "Grandfather, I'm done!" Jianggang's voice rang out. He Zhen approached. The tree had been cut into several pieces, not cleanly, but usable. "Well done." When He Zhen patted Jianggang's head, the boy smiled brightly. That smile was so radiant it made He Zhen's heart ache.
Could someone like himself take in such a child? A sinner like himself? But He pushed away that thought. He'd already taken him in. This child was his responsibility now. Zhonggong. Yes, grandfather. Let's live together from now on, chopping wood, gathering herbs, sometimes going to the village to sell them. Let's live like that. Zhonggong's eyes widened. Tears welled up. Really? We can really live together? Of course. Let's live together. Zhonggong embraced He. His small body trembled. He patted Zhonggong's back. He would protect this child with everything he had. He didn't know if it could be his atonement, but at least he would protect this child. And so their life together began. In the mornings, Zhonggong chopped wood. His axe skills gradually improved. At first, it took a shichin to fell one tree, but now half a shichin sufficed. He watched with satisfaction. At midday, they gathered herbs. He led and Zhonggong followed. He taught him about each herb. This is ginseng, good for boosting energy. This is angelica root, effective for nourishing the blood. This is cnidium, good for headaches. Zhonggong listened intently and memorized. Though his memory wasn't particularly good, through repetition he eventually learned to distinguish most herbs. In the evenings, they hunted. When rabbits or pheasants were caught in He traps, they brought them back. Sometimes even a roe deer. On those occasions, He and Zhonggong ate their fill of meat. Zhonggong was happy each time. He'd never known that eating roasted meat by a warm fire could be such a joyful thing. At night, He taught Zhonggong to read and write. Zhonggong, you must learn to read. To live in this world, you need to know letters. He wrote characters in the dirt with a wooden stick. Zhonggong watched and copied. It was difficult. The characters were complex, looked similar, and hard to memorize. But Zhonggong didn't give up. Every night he wrote, read, and memorized. Eventually, he could read simple texts. And so spring came. The snow melted and buds sprouted. The mountain turned green and birds began to sing. Zhonggong learned for the first time how beautiful spring was as a season. When begging on the streets, he hadn't even noticed the changing seasons. It was just cold or hot. But now it was different. He could feel the seasons change. The air was different, the sky was different, everything was different. "Grandfather, spring has come," Zhonggong shouted. He smiled. "Yes, spring has come. Spring is really wonderful. Yes, it's a good season." He patted Zhonggong's head. He was glad this child could smile so brightly, glad that a dying child was now so alive. "Zhonggong?" "Yes, grandfather." "You need to train your body for your health. To live in the mountains, you must be strong." "Train my body?" "Yes, I'll teach you." He began teaching Zhonggong basic meditation techniques, the Shaolin Foundation breathing method. It was so basic that everyone dismissed it, but He knew better. Fundamentals were most important. No matter how flashy the martial art or how powerful the technique, without solid fundamentals, they were useless.
This meditation method is called the Shaolin Foundation Breathing Method. It's the first technique all Shaolin disciples learn. It's neither flashy nor powerful, but it's the most important. Haijian sat Zhonggong down and spoke. "First, establish your posture. Straighten your back, Relax your shoulders, tuck your chin slightly. Zhang Gong adjusted his posture as Haijin instructed. Haijin placed his hand on Zhang Gong's back to correct the position. Now regulate your breathing, slowly, deeply, evenly. Breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth. When you inhale, your belly expands. When you exhale, it contracts. Zhang Gong began breathing as instructed. At first, many stray thoughts arose. All sorts of ideas flashed through his mind. But Haijin said, "Empty your thoughts. Think of nothing. Just focus on your breathing. Only feel the breath entering and leaving." Zhang Gong tried, but it wasn't easy. The more he tried to empty his thoughts, the more arose. Memories of hunger, memories of cold, memories of loneliness. Zhang Gong struggled to push these thoughts away and focus only on breathing. Days passed like this. Every morning and evening he sat and regulated his breath. At first, he could barely sit for a quarter hour, but gradually the time increased, and on the fourth day he suddenly felt something warm stirring in his lower abdomen in the place called the dantian. Small and faint, but unmistakable. "Grandfather, I feel something," Zhang Gong shouted. Haijin looked at him in surprise. Already? Normally, it took at least several months to sense qi with the Shaolin Foundation breathing method, but this child had felt it in just 4 days. Was it talent or the result of his stubborn focus? Haijin couldn't tell, but one thing was certain, this child had potential. Well done, Zhang Gong. That is the sensation of qi, the seed of internal energy. From now on, you must nurture that seed. Zhang Gong was thrilled. It felt real now. He could learn martial arts. From that day, Zhang Gong trained even harder. Every morning and evening he sat cross-legged and cultivated his internal energy. The qi sensation that had been small gradually grew. 1 month, 2 months, 3 months passed, and he could feel his dantian filling with warm energy. Summer came. Haijin taught Zhang Gong martial stances, horse stance, bow stance, empty stance. Zhang Gong learned these stances, sweating profusely. It was difficult, but he didn't give up. The foundation of martial arts is stance. Without proper stance, you cannot properly execute techniques. At Haijin's words, Zhang Gong nodded and trained even harder. He held each stance for a quarter hour, sometimes half a shichen. His legs trembled and his whole body shook, but he endured. A month passed, and Zhang Gong's stances were now quite stable. Haijin moved to the next stage. Haijin taught Zhang Gong the Arhant fist, a basic Shaolin fist technique. Though Haijin couldn't demonstrate directly, he explained each movement and corrected Zhang Gong's form. Clench your fist firmly, but don't put in too much force. Power only enters at the moment of striking. Zhang Gong swung his fists as Haijin instructed. At first it was awkward, but gradually became natural. After 1,000, 10,000 repetitions, his body remembered.
He also learned Shaolin footwork, how to move his feet, how to turn his body, how to maintain center. Zhang Gong ran through the mountains practicing footwork, stepping on rocks, climbing trees, crossing streams, training his body. Autumn came. Zhang Gong had now learned martial arts quite well. His execution of Arhat fist was no longer clumsy, and his body moved lightly and swiftly with Shaolin footwork. Haijin watched Zhang Gong's growth with satisfaction. "Now I'll teach you a special martial art." At Haijin's words, Zhang Gong's eyes lit up. "It's one of the Shaolin's 72 arts.
the 100-pace divine fist. 100-pace divine fist? Yes, a martial art that can strike from 100 paces away. A fist technique that projects internal energy outside the body to strike an enemy. Jumgong couldn't imagine it. Striking an enemy without even touching them. Was that possible? But it's not easy. The 100-pace divine fist has stages. First 1 pace, then 2 paces, 3 paces. You gradually extend the distance. Reaching 100 paces takes a long time. Even in my youth, I only reached 50 paces. At Heijin's words, Jumgong steeled his resolve. Even if difficult, he would do it. Absolutely. Heijin stood a tree in front of Jumgong. Strike this tree. From 1 pace away, extend your fist and make the tree shake. 1 pace was 1 step's distance, a distance where the fist couldn't reach. Jumgong took his stance. Heijin taught him the incantation of the 100-pace divine fist. Qi sinks to dantian. Force focuses in fist. Will moves qi forth. Form unites with spirit. Gather energy in dantian. Concentrate force in fist. Move energy with intent. Unite body and spirit. Jumgong recited the incantation, trying to understand. Heijin placed his hands on Jumgong's body and indicated each pathway. Dantian, Mingmen, Jiaji, Jianjing, Kuiqi, fist. He repeated the pathway several times. Now slowly extend your fist while reciting the incantation. Jumgong recited. Qi sinks to dantian. He gathered internal energy in his dantian. He felt a small but warm sensation. Force focuses in fist. He tried to send internal energy to his fist, but it wasn't easy. The energy didn't flow properly. Slowly, don't rush. Recall the pathway for internal energy. Dantian, Mingmen, Jiaji, Gianjing, Kuiqi, fist. Jumgong closed his eyes and concentrated. He tried to feel the internal energy flowing. Slowly, very slowly, the energy that began in dantian rose up his back. It passed through his shoulder and flowed into his arm, then gathered in his fist. Will moves qi forth. He moved his intent, extended his fist, tried to send the internal energy, but nothing happened. The tree didn't budge. Form unites with spirit. He tried again, but still nothing happened.
Heijin said, "That's natural. No one succeeds from the start. The 100-pace divine fist is a difficult martial art. Projecting internal energy outside the body is no easy task." Jumgong kept extending his fist, once, twice, 10 times, 100 times, reciting the incantation, gathering internal energy, extending his fist, but the tree didn't move. Jumgong grew exhausted, sweat poured. He felt his internal energy depleting. That's enough for today. Overexertion comes when internal energy is depleted. At Heijin's words, Jumgong collapsed. It was hard, really hard, but he didn't want to give up. "Grandfather, can I do it?" "You can, because you're persistent, because you don't give up." Heijin's words gave Jumgong strength. Yes, don't give up. If he continued, someday he'd succeed. And so summer passed and autumn came. Jumgong trained in 100-pace divine fist every day. Heijin checked his incantation each time, corrected his stance, and indicated the flow of internal energy. Though he couldn't demonstrate directly, Heijin's instruction was perfect.
Everything about the 100-pace divine fist was in his mind. A month passed. Zhang became accustomed to gathering internal energy to his fist tip. 2 months passed. Zhang perfectly understood the pathway of internal energy flow. 3 months passed, and finally, form unites with spirit. When Zhang extended his fist, the tree shook. Small, but it definitely moved. From 1 pace away, without the fist touching, the tree had moved. "Grandfather, I did it!" Zhang shouted. Haijin smiled. "Well done, Zhang. You finally succeeded." Tears welled in Zhang's eyes. He was happy, truly happy. 3 months of daily training had finally borne fruit. "Now let's extend it to 2 paces." At Haijin's words, Zhang nodded, and so Zhang extended the distance to 2 paces, then 3. It was difficult but fun. He could feel his martial arts improving, feel himself growing stronger. When they went to the village to sell herbs, Haijin and Zhang went together. "Zhang, don't get too close to the villagers," Haijin said. Zhang tilted his head. "Why?" "We must live quietly, without drawing attention." That dark thing was mixed in Haijin's voice again, and after hesitating briefly, Haijin spoke something more important. "And Zhang, remember one thing. You must not show the martial arts you've learned in front of others, especially," Haijin's voice lowered further, "especially if you see Shaolin monks, you must never ever use martial arts. Do you understand?" Zhang saw his grandfather's serious expression, the most stern face he'd ever seen. "Yes, grandfather, I'll remember for sure. I'll never use martial arts in front of Shaolin monks." "Good. This is very important, not just for your safety, but for both of us, for our peaceful life together." Zhang didn't ask further. He knew his grandfather had some deep history. Someday he would tell him. He would wait until then. Winter came again. Zhang could now execute 100-pace divine fist up to 10 paces. Amazing growth in 1 year. Jin was both amazed and worried by Zhang's growth. This child was growing too quickly, and someday he would learn about the past. How would this child react then? But Jin shook off that thought. For now, enjoy the time with this child, chopping wood, gathering herbs, hunting, living like this. This was the small happiness given to him. Zhang was chopping wood in the snow. His axe skills were quite good now. It didn't even take half a quarter hour to fell 1 tree. Sweat flowed. Though it was cold, moving his body made him warm. "Grandfather!" Zhang shouted. Jin came out of the cabin. "You're done?" "Yes, I did a lot today." "You worked hard. Let's go inside and have some warm tea." "Yes." The two entered the cabin. A fire burned. Warmth. Jin brewed tea, and Zhang sat by the fire, warming his hands. "Zhang." "Yes, grandfather?" "Are you happy?" At the sudden question, Zhang paused for a moment. Then he smiled brightly. "Yes, I'm really happy." "I see." Jin smiled, but behind that smile, something sad was hidden. Zhang felt it, but didn't ask. Drinking tea, Zhang thought. He was truly happy. He had a grandfather who'd saved him from death, a warm home, he wasn't hungry, and he'd learned martial arts. Could he be any happier? But Zhang didn't know how long this happiness would last, and what storm waited behind this happiness. Jin drank his tea and looked out the window. Snow was falling, white and silent, as if trying to cover everything, the past, sins, everything. But Ye-Jin knew the past never disappears. Someday it returns, and then this child he cherished most, would be hurt. Ye-Jin quietly drank his tea and watched the snow outside the window.
Author's note: if you enjoyed listening and reading, please subscribe, like, and turn on notifications.